When Alexandra Reeves applied to the Marine Corps' Elite Scout Sniper program, her application was met with immediate skepticism despite having broken 3 marksmanship records during standard infantry training. "Combat sniping isn't about range scores," explained Major James Harrington, the selection commander who personally rejected her application. "It's about battlefield psychology and physical endurance capabilities that female soldiers simply don't possess." Relegated to standard infantry, despite outperforming 94% of male candidates, Reeves was assigned as perimeter security for a classified operation in Korengal Valley, a position described as glorified guard duty by the tactical team. 3 days into the mission, a coordinated attack by elite insurgent forces resulted in devastating casualties, with all commanding officers killed or incapacitated, and communications jammed. As 2,000 surviving Marines found themselves trapped in a valley with overwhelming enemy forces closing from 3 sides, military command deemed the position irrecoverable, with air support impossible for at least 17 hours. What followed was described by hardened combat veterans as beyond explanation. A single sniper systematically creating an impossible escape corridor through precisely calculated shots that defied conventional ballistics. Moving between exposed positions under constant enemy fire, Reeves would conduct what Pentagon analysts later classified as the most extraordinary individual combat operation in modern military history. Camp Lejeune Sniper Selection Facility, North Carolina, 6 months earlier. "With respect, Major Harrington, my scores exceed the qualification requirements in all categories," Gunnery Sergeant Alexandra Reeves stated, maintaining perfect military bearing despite the rejection she had just received. "The requirements are minimums, Gunnery Sergeant, not guarantees of selection," Major Harrington replied, not bothering to look up from the paperwork he was signing. Her rejection notice: "Scout sniper operations require more than technical proficiency. The psychological demands of isolation, extreme patience, and high-stakes decision-making create a profile that I've demonstrated throughout assessment, sir," Reeves interjected, an unusual breach of protocol that reflected her frustration. "My isolation exercises scored in the 97th percentile. Target discrimination testing was perfect. Stress endurance evaluation exceeded standard metrics." Harrington finally looked up, his expression a mixture of irritation and entrenched perspective. "Controlled assessment environments aren't combat, Reeves. The Scout Sniper program has never admitted female candidates, for good reason. The physical and psychological profile required for operational success isn't compatible with female soldiers, regardless of range scores." The Major's aide, Captain Williams, shifted uncomfortably at this statement, but remained silent. Reeves's reputation in the Corps was well established. 3 marksmanship records broken during her 10 years of service, commendations for exceptional performance under fire during 2 deployments, and a growing file of recommendations from commanders who had witnessed her abilities firsthand. "Sir, with respect, that assessment contradicts my combat record," Reeves responded, her voice level despite the obvious discrimination she was facing. "This isn't a debate, Gunnery Sergeant," Harrington concluded, sliding her rejection notice across the desk. "Your skills are valuable to the Corps in conventional infantry roles. I suggest you focus your career ambitions accordingly." As Reeves exited the selection facility, she passed a group of male candidates, being congratulated on their acceptance to the program. Their scores, visible on the instructor's clipboard, were notably lower than her own in several key categories. Captain Williams caught up to her in the parking lot. "That was wrong in there, Gunny," he said quietly. "For what it's worth, several of us on the selection board voted for your admission." "Apparently not enough, sir," Reeves replied, her disciplined expression betraying little of her disappointment. "Harrington's old school. He's got support from above for maintaining certain tradition." Williams hesitated. "Look, I can't change the outcome, but I've recommended you for the upcoming operation in Korengal. It's not Scout Sniper, but it's important work with potential for recognition. Reeves nodded sharply. Appreciated, sir. I'll continue serving wherever the Corps assigns me. What neither of them could have anticipated was how that consolation assignment would soon place Alexandra Reeves in a position to demonstrate capabilities that even her strongest advocates had never imagined possible. 3 weeks later, Reeves found herself deploying with the 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines, to Afghanistan's notorious Korengal Valley, an area so contested it had earned the nickname the Valley of Death among American forces. Her assigned role as perimeter security for the forward operating base was widely recognized as a minimal impact position, keeping her skills effectively sidelined during a critical operation. Guess they needed someone to watch the back door while the real work happens up front, remarked Staff Sergeant Collins, one of the Scout Sniper program graduates, who had been selected over her despite lower qualification scores. Reeves had long since learned to let such comments roll past, without response. Her focus remained on professional excellence regardless of assignment. While other Marines sometimes misinterpreted her reserved demeanor as coldness, those who worked closely with her recognized it as the same calculated patience that made her exceptional behind a rifle. As the battalion established its position in the valley, Reeves methodically familiarized herself with the surrounding terrain, a habit she had developed throughout her career. While her official duties required only standard awareness of immediate perimeter area, she spent her limited free time creating detailed range cards for the entire valley, calculating firing solutions for distant features, and mapping potential vulnerability points that concerned her about the battalion's position. "You're not getting paid extra for all that, you know," Lieutenant Garcia commented upon finding her working on these calculations during off hours. "Just keeping sharp, sir," Reeves replied without looking up from her notebook. "The valley provides multiple covered approach routes that concern me." Garcia studied her work with growing interest. "This is Scout Sniper level analysis, Gunny. Why wasn't this included in the operational planning?" Reeves chose her words carefully. "I wasn't asked to provide input, Lieutenant. My assignment is perimeter security only." The lieutenant frowned. "Bring these calculations to the planning meeting tomorrow. They should at least be considered." But at the next day's briefing, Reeves's analysis received only cursory attention from the battalion's leadership. Major Williamson, the operation commander, glanced briefly at her meticulously prepared range cards and terrain assessment. "Appreciate the initiative, Gunnery Sergeant, but our Scout Sniper team has already conducted standard terrain evaluation. Please focus on your assigned responsibilities." The dismissal was polite but clear. As she gathered her materials, Reeves noticed Captain Rogers, the battalion's operations officer, studying her calculations with more serious consideration. "Leave those with me," he said quietly. "I'd like to review them more thoroughly." It was a small acknowledgement, but Reeves had learned to appreciate even limited recognition of her capability. She couldn't have known then how critically important those calculations would soon become, or that Captain Rogers would be among the first casualties when the operation went catastrophically wrong. Korengal Valley, Afghanistan. Present day. The operation had proceeded according to plan. For the first 62 hours, the 2nd Battalion had established secure positions throughout their assigned sector of the valley, conducted initial reconnaissance of suspected insurgent locations, and begun the process of engaging local village elders to gather intelligence on enemy movements. Alexandra Reeves maintained her assigned position on the western perimeter of the forward operating base, conducting regular security sweeps while continuing her personal mapping of the surrounding terrain features. Her concern about the battalion's vulnerability had only increased as she observed their deployment pattern, too dispersed for effective mutual support if a coordinated attack occurred. On the morning of the 3rd day, Captain Rogers sought her out before joining a patrol to the northern villages. "Your terrain analysis was spot on, Gunny," he acknowledged, showing her updated operational maps that had incorporated some of her calculations. "I've adjusted several patrol routes based on your line-of-sight vulnerabilities." Reeves nodded appreciatively. "Thank you, sir. I'm still concerned about our overall positioning." The eastern ridgeline provides overlapping fields of fire that could isolate our units from each other if properly utilized. Rogers studied the area she indicated. Insurgents in this region haven't demonstrated that level of tactical sophistication. They typically favor direct assaults or improvised explosives. With respect, sir, that pattern may reflect our detection capabilities rather than their actual tactics. Reeves suggested. I've observed indications of more disciplined observation posts than intelligence reported. The captain considered this with growing concern. I'll raise it with Major Williamson after today's patrol. Keep monitoring those positions. Yes, sir, Reeves replied, though she doubted her observations would receive serious consideration from the battalion command. 4 hours later, her worst concerns materialized with devastating precision. The attack began, not with the expected chaos of insurgent mortar fire or the familiar cacophony of automatic weapons, but with an eerie series of synchronized single shots that dropped 6 key personnel simultaneously, including Captain Rogers and the battalion's communications officer. Within seconds, the disciplined opening gave way to intense fire from multiple elevated positions, targeting the command center, communications equipment, and heavy weapons emplacements with uncanny accuracy. From her position on the western perimeter, Reeves immediately recognized what was happening: a sophisticated decapitation strategy, targeting leadership and communication capabilities before the main assault. This wasn't the work of standard insurgent forces, but indicated specialized training and planning beyond anything intelligence had anticipated. As the attack intensified, the battalion's response was increasingly hampered by disrupted command structure and compromised communication. Unit commanders attempted to coordinate defense, but the attackers' positioning exploited precisely the vulnerabilities Reeves had identified in her analysis: overlapping fields of fire that isolated Marine positions from supporting each other. Lieutenant Garcia found Reeves at her position, where she was systematically engaging enemy fighters, attempting to flank their western defenses. "Gunny, we've lost the CP," he reported grimly, referring to the command post. "Major Williamson, Captain Rogers, and most of the staff are down. Communications to headquarters are jammed. We're effectively cut off." Reeves nodded without shifting her attention from her sector. "Enemy force size and composition. Best estimate is 200 plus fighters, demonstrating training and equipment beyond standard insurgent capability. They've established blocking positions on all primary exit routes from the valley." Garcia's expression reflected the gravity of their situation. "We're surrounded, with no available reinforcement or air support for at least 17 hours due to weather conditions at the nearest airbase." Reeves processed this information with the calculated detachment that characterized her professional approach. The situation was objectively dire. Approximately 200 surviving Marines trapped in deteriorating defensive positions, surrounded by a superior force with commanding terrain advantage, and no prospect of immediate external support. "Lieutenant, I need to access the scout sniper equipment cache," she stated with decisive clarity. Garcia looked surprised. "Those supplies are restricted to qualified personnel, Gunny." "I'm aware of protocol, sir," Reeves replied but I've identified the enemy's command structure and primary firing positions. With a proper rifle and support equipment, I can disrupt their operational coordination." The lieutenant hesitated only briefly before making his decision. The desperate circumstances overrode standard protocols. "Authorized gunnery sergeant. What's your plan?" "I need to reach the eastern ridge," Reeves explained, pointing to an exposed position that appeared suicidally dangerous. "From there, I can engage their command elements and create disruptions sufficient for a coordinated withdrawal through the southern ravine. That's a kilometer of open ground under direct enemy observation." Garcia objected. "Nobody could reach that position alive." Reeves met his gaze with calm certainty. "I can, sir. It's the only option that gives this battalion a chance of survival." Something in her absolute confidence persuaded him, "Take whatever equipment you need. I'll coordinate what's left of our forces to prepare for movement on your signal." Within minutes, Reeves had accessed the sniper cache and selected equipment with practiced efficiency. An M40A5 sniper rifle with match-grade ammunition, specialized range-finding equipment, and minimal survival gear to maintain mobility. As she prepared for what could only be described as a suicide mission, she discovered Captain Rogers' body near the destroyed command post. In his hand was her terrain analysis, blood-stained but clearly consulted in his final moment. With grim determination, Reeves began her movement toward the eastern ridge, initiating what would later be described as one of the most extraordinary individual combat operations in modern military history. Eastern Ridgeline, Karingal Valley, 1732 hours. Alexandra Reeves moved with the disciplined efficiency that had defined her military career, utilizing terrain features and approaching shadows to conceal her advance toward the eastern ridge. The movement across exposed territory that Lieutenant Garcia had deemed impossible required every element of her training: patternless advancement, micro-terrain utilization, and precisely timed movements synchronized with enemy attention patterns. It took 47 minutes to reach her selected position, an exposed outcropping that provided commanding views of both the enemy positions and the trapped Marine units. The location would have been immediately fatal for a conventional sniper, as it offered minimal concealment. However, Reeves' strategy depended not on remaining hidden, but on creating such devastating precision effects that her presence would disrupt the entire enemy operation before they could effectively target her. Setting up her position with methodical precision, Reeves conducted rapid environmental calculations: wind speed and direction at multiple elevations, humidity factors affecting ballistic performance, temperature gradients across the valley. These calculations, which would have required technology assistance for most snipers, she performed mentally, a skill that had contributed to her breaking marksmanship records during training. Her first target was over 950 meters distant, an enemy commander coordinating the southern flanking operation from what he believed was a safely removed position. Adjusting for significant elevation drop, 12 malafire crosswind, and the last light conditions, Reeves controlled her breathing to the practiced rhythm that had become second nature. The shot, when it came, was perfect, removing the enemy commander instantly and creating momentary confusion in the southern operation. Without pausing to confirm the effect, Reeves immediately transitioned to her second target, an enemy sniper, whose position she had identified by analyzing bullet impacts on Marine positions. This shot at nearly 1,100 meters, and requiring compensation for unusual thermal conditions in the valley, eliminated a threat that had pinned down an entire Marine platoon. She established communication with Lieutenant Garcia, using a compact radio taken from the sniper equipment cache. Lighting 2, this is Overwatch. Southern Command element neutralized. Begin consolidating units for coordinated movement. I'll create a corridor through the ravine approach. Garcia's response conveyed both surprise and dawning hope. Overwatch, confirm your position. We're registering effects across multiple enemy formations simultaneously. Eastern Ridge, implementing systematic disruption. Reeves replied concisely, prepare all units for movement in 20 minutes. We'll advise primary route when corridor is established. What followed was a masterclass in battlefield manipulation through precision fire. While traditional sniper operations typically focus on high-value target elimination, Reeves employed a more sophisticated approach, systematically removing key tactical elements of the enemy force to create a functional collapse of their operational capability. Each shot was selected, not merely for its immediate effect, but for how it would contribute to the overall disruption of enemy coordination. Communications operators, heavy weapons teams, and observation positions were methodically eliminated, in a sequence that prevented the enemy from adapting to the unexpected threat. As darkness began to fall across the valley, Reeves increased her firing rate, recognizing that the approaching night would soon remove her visibility advantage. The precision of her shooting under rapidly deteriorating light conditions approached the theoretical limits of human capability. With shot placement that experienced snipers would later describe as beyond the boundaries of established ballistic performance, Lieutenant Garcia coordinated the Marine units according to Reeves' developing strategy, consolidating their scattered positions into a more defensible formation, prepared for movement. Overwatch. All units positioned for extraction. Confirm route and timing. Southern Ravine. Moving in 3 elements with 30-second intervals. Reeves directed, while continuing her systematic fire. First element moves on my mark. Will provide continuous coverage throughout extraction. As the Marines began their coordinated movement, Reeves transitioned to her most challenging phase, providing continuous precision fire to neutralize enemy positions that threatened the extraction. This required shots at multiple distances and elevations, often with mere seconds between engagements, while calculating separate ballistic solutions for each target. Enemy forces, recognizing the devastating impact of the unexpected sniper, attempted to adjust their operations to counter this threat. They redirected significant firepower toward Reeves' position on the ridge, forcing her to incorporate movement between shots, while maintaining her precision effects. Despite increasingly heavy fire directed at her position, Reeves continued her methodical disruption of enemy operations. Her extraordinary discipline enabled her to maintain focus on her mission rather than personal survival, calculating each shot with the same precision despite the growing danger to her position. Overwatch. First and second elements clear of primary danger zone. Garcia report. Third element moving now. What's your extraction plan? Maintain current movement, Reeves responded, while adjusting her position to avoid concentrated enemy fire. I'll continue coverage until all elements have cleared the valley. What she didn't communicate was the reality of her situation, that her position was becoming increasingly untenable as enemy forces concentrated their attention on the devastating sniper, who had dismantled their carefully planned operation. The statistical probability of her own survival was diminishing with each passing minute, yet her rate of effective fire never decreased. As the final Marine element approached the exit point from the valley, Reeves implemented the last phase of her operation, a series of shots specifically calculated to trigger secondary explosions among enemy ammunition positions. The resulting chaos provided crucial concealment for the Marines' final extraction movement. All elements clear of primary engagement zone, Garcia confirmed. Overwatch. Withdraw to extraction point immediate. Reeves acknowledged the order, while already calculating her own extraction route, a challenging descent that would require all her physical capabilities after hours of intense sniper operation. What no one could have anticipated was that her most extraordinary shooting was yet to come. Eastern Ridgeline, Karenga Valley. 2017 hours. As darkness enveloped the Karenga Valley, Alexandra Reeves maintained her position on the exposed ridgeline, continuing precision fire to cover the Marines' withdrawal. Despite increasingly desperate circumstances, the enemy, having identified her position after nearly 2 hours of devastating effects, had redirected significant resources toward eliminating the sniper who had dismantled their operation. Final element approaching extraction point, Lieutenant Garcia reported over the radio. Overwatch, what's your status? Reeves adjusted her position to avoid a concentration of incoming fire, before responding, maintaining coverage, position compromised but operational. What she didn't communicate was the severity of her situation. A round had grazed her left shoulder, limiting her mobility while not affecting her shooting position. More concerning was her ammunition status, down to 17 rounds with dozens of enemy fighters converging on her position. Under normal circumstances, any sniper would have withdrawn, given these conditions. But Reeves calculated that premature withdrawal would expose the final Marine element to unacceptable risk. Her mission parameters remained unchanged: ensure the battalion's extraction regardless of personal cost. As complete darkness settled over the valley, Reeves faced yet another escalating challenge. Her night vision equipment had been damaged by a close impact, forcing her to rely on ambient illumination and muzzle flashes to identify targets. For most snipers, effective operations would have become impossible under these conditions, yet Reeves adapted with the same methodical precision that characterized her entire approach. She began timing her shots to coincide with momentary illuminations from ongoing firefights, maintaining extraordinary accuracy despite the nearly impossible visual condition. "Overwatch enemy forces massing for pursuit of our withdrawal," Garcia warned. "We need continued disruption for approximately 12 more minutes to reach defensible terrain." "Understood," Reeves acknowledged simply, already adjusting her firing sequence to target the pursuit element's leadership. What followed was perhaps the most remarkable phase of her already extraordinary operation. Working with severely limited ammunition, compromised position, physical injury, and minimal visibility, Reeves executed a series of shots that experienced combat observers would later describe as defying physical possibility. Each round was placed with surgical precision to create maximum disruption of enemy movement, targeting not just individual fighters, but doing so in a sequence that created tactical confusion and hesitation among pursuing forces. She manipulated enemy perception through selective targeting, creating the impression of multiple firing positions through carefully timed shots from slightly different locations. "All elements have reached defensible position," Garcia finally reported. "Extraction vehicles inbound from forward operating base. Overwatch withdraw immediately. Your mission is complete." Reeves had already begun her extraction, identifying a withdrawal route that balanced speed against exposure. With only 3 rounds remaining, she needed to create final effects that would delay pursuit long enough for her own movement. It was at this moment that her position came under concentrated RPG fire, the enemy having finally marshaled heavy weapons against the devastating snipe. The first explosion impacted 15 meters from her position, showering her with debris and further compromising her already injured condition. Recognizing the imminent danger, Reeves made a decision that reflected the same calculated precision as her shoot. Her final 3 rounds were directed not at enemy personnel but at a fuel storage location she had identified during her earlier terrain analysis. The resulting explosion created both a visual distraction and a temporary barrier of flame that would impede pursuit force. Using this momentary advantage, Reeves began her withdrawal, a treacherous descent in darkness, while managing a bleeding shoulder wound and increasingly limited mobility. The route required technical climbing skills under conditions where a single misstep meant fatal consequence. "Overwatch, confirm your movement," Garcia requested, concern evident in his voice, as enemy fire continued to concentrate on her last known position. There was no response. For the Marines reaching safety because of her extraordinary operation, the silence created a grim assumption about her fate. What they couldn't know was that Reeves had ditched the radio to reduce weight for her challenging extraction move, applying the same methodical discipline to her withdrawal that had characterized her shooting. She navigated the treacherous terrain with precision born of absolute focus. 2 hours later, as the battalion consolidated at the forward operating base and prepared for medical evacuation of wounded personnel, a sentry reported movement approaching from the eastern perimeter. Weapons were immediately trained on the approaching figure, illuminated only by moonlight. "Hold fire," Lieutenant Garcia ordered, recognizing the distinctive movement pattern despite the distance. "That's over." Alexandra Reeves walked into the base under her own power, her uniform torn and bloodied, carrying the sniper rifle she had used to save 200 Marines against impossible odds. Her expression remained the same composed focus that had never wavered throughout the entire operation. Medical personnel immediately moved to assess her injuries, but Reeves' first action was to report directly to Garcia. "Mission complete, sir. Battalion extracted with minimal additional casualties." The lieutenant stared at her with a mixture of disbelief and profound respect. "How did you—" He gestured vaguely toward the valley they had escaped. "The odds against what you just accomplished." "Calculated risks based on terrain analysis and observed enemy patterns," Reeves replied matter-of-factly, as if she hadn't just completed one of the most extraordinary individual combat operations in modern military history. As medics finally convinced her to accept treatment for her injuries, Garcia picked up a secure communications unit. "I need a direct line to Marine Corps Command," he instructed the communications officer. "Priority Alpha." The officer questioned, surprised by the unusually high classification. Garcia looked toward Reeves as medical personnel attended to her wounds. "We just witnessed something that's going to change a lot of perceptions about who belongs in special operations." Marine Corps Headquarters, Quantico, Virginia. 3 months later, the ceremonial hall fell silent as Alexandra Reeves approached the podium. The assembled military leadership and distinguished guests, rising in a mark of respect rarely accorded to a non-commanding officer. Her dress uniform displayed a constellation of decorations that told the story of exceptional service culminating in the events at Korengal Valley, including the Navy Cross that had been presented moments earlier. The actions of Gunnery Sergeant Reeves during Operation Valiant Guardian represent the highest traditions of the United States Marine Corps. The commandant had stated during the presentation, "Her extraordinary courage, tactical brilliance, and selfless dedication saved the lives of 200 Marines under circumstances that defied conventional operational parameters." Behind the speaker's platform, large screens displayed declassified portions of the after-action analysis, satellite imagery showing the positions of Marine units and enemy forces, technical breakdowns of the shooting sequences that had systematically dismantled the enemy operation, and statistical analyses of shot difficulties that had established new benchmarks for precision marksmanship under combat conditions. In the front row, Lieutenant Garcia, now Captain Garcia, following his promotion for leadership during the operation, watched with evident pride. Beside him sat several members of the 2nd Battalion, who had volunteered to attend the ceremony, their presence a testament to their recognition of what Reeves had accomplished on their behalf. Less comfortable but equally attentive was Major Harrington, the Scout Sniper Selection Officer, who had rejected Reeves' application 6 months earlier. His expression reflected the profound reassessment that had occurred throughout the Corps following her unprecedented performance in Korengal. As Reeves addressed the assembled audience, her manner remained the same composed professionalism that had characterized her entire career, neither seeking the spotlight nor shrinking from the recognition her actions had earned. The mission in Korengal Valley demonstrated that operational excellence transcends conventional categories and assumptions, she stated, her voice carrying clearly through the hushed hall. The capabilities that enabled success weren't extraordinary, but rather the result of standard training applied without artificial limitation. This diplomatic framing of what had been in reality an extraordinary individual performance beyond established parameters drew knowing smiles from many of the combat veterans present. The official reports had been less restrained, with the operation analysis describing her performance as beyond established human capability parameters under comparable conditions, and redefining the tactical possibilities of precision engagement. Following the ceremony, Reeves found herself approached by the Marine Corps Sniper School commandant, a different officer than had overseen the program during her rejected application. "Gunnery Sergeant, I wanted to inform you personally that the Scout Sniper program selection criteria have been comprehensively revised," he stated. "Your performance in Korengal provided irrefutable evidence that our previous parameters inadequately focused on actual operational capabilities." Reeves acknowledged this with professional composure. "Thank you for informing me, sir. We've also incorporated elements of your engagement methodology into the advanced curriculum. The technical staff is particularly interested in your approach to rapid environmental calculation without technological assistance." What he didn't mention, though both were aware, was that the first female candidates had already been accepted into the Scout Sniper program following the policy revisions, their selection directly resulting from the paradigm shift Reeves' performance had created. Captain Garcia joined them, extending his hand to Reeves with evident respect. They're still analyzing your shot data from Korengal, he informed her. The ballistics experts say at least 17 of your confirmed engagements exceeded theoretical probability models for successful first-round impact under the recorded conditions. Environmental calculation becomes more intuitive with sufficient practice, Reeves replied modestly. The valley created unusual but predictable air movement patterns that could be incorporated into firing solutions. This characteristically understated assessment of what had been described in official reports as unprecedented marksmanship under impossible conditions drew a smile from Garcia. The battalion still talks about watching you create that extraction corridor shot by shot. Most of them believed they were going to die that day. Major Harrington approached, his manner markedly different from their last interaction at the sniper school selection board. Gunnery Sergeant Reeves, he acknowledged formally. Your performance in Korengal was illuminating. Thank you, sir, Reeves responded neutrally. Harrington clearly had more to say but struggled to find appropriate words. I've been asked to review our selection methodology across several special operations programs. Your operational data has proven significant in identifying areas where our assumptions may have been flawed. This careful acknowledgement of how completely wrong his previous assessment had been represented a significant institutional shift, one that extended far beyond Reeves herself to affect policy throughout the Corps. Later that evening at a reception for the ceremony participants, Reeves was approached by a group of recently commissioned female officers, their expressions conveying barely contained admiration. Gunnery Sergeant, your actions have changed everything for women in combat specialties, one lieutenant stated. The combat exclusion policies that were still being informally maintained despite official changes are being systematically identified and eliminated. Reeves considered this with her characteristic thoughtfulness. Performance standards should remain the only relevant metric for operational roles, she replied. Gender becomes irrelevant when the mission parameters are clearly defined by capability requirements, rather than traditional assumptions. As the reception continued, the Marine Corps Commandant himself requested a private word with Reeves. I'll be direct, Gunnery Sergeant. We're establishing a specialized training unit focused on advanced precision engagement in non-standard combat environments. I want you to develop and lead it. Reeves maintained her professional composure despite the extraordinary nature of the offer. That would be a significant departure from established program structures, sir. So was your performance in Korengal, the Commandant replied with a slight smile. Sometimes the parameters need to be rewritten when the evidence becomes undeniable. Over the following months, what became known as the Advanced Precision Engagement Program transformed sniper training methodology throughout, not just the Marine Corps, but military special operations broadly. Incorporating the techniques and approaches that Reeves had demonstrated under combat conditions, the program established new parameters for what was considered possible in precision engagement under adverse conditions. Most significantly, the program operated with selection criteria based entirely on performance metrics, rather than demographic categories, creating opportunities for exceptional candidates, regardless of gender or other traditionally limiting factors. 6 months after the Korengal operation, Reeves found herself at Quantico overseeing the final qualification testing for the first class of the Advanced Precision Engagement Program. The candidates, selected solely on demonstrated capabilities rather than traditional backgrounds, included both men and women, with diverse specializations that would have been excluded from conventional sniper training. Among the observers was Major Harrington, whose perspective had undergone a profound evolution following the irrefutable evidence of Reeves' performance in Korengal. The qualification standards you've established exceed previous parameters by significant margins, he noted as they watched candidates executing precision engagement scenarios under simulated adverse conditions. The Korengal operation demonstrated that conventional limitations were artificially constrained, Reeves replied, her focus remaining on the candidate's performance. Human capability extends beyond established parameters when selection and training focus on core aptitudes rather than traditional profiles. What she didn't articulate was how completely the institutional landscape had changed because of her single operation. The detailed analysis of performance had revealed capabilities that military theorists had previously considered impossible, from environmental calculation methodologies that outperformed technological systems,
to engagement sequencing that demonstrated unprecedented tactical awareness under extreme pressure. Captain Garcia, who had been appointed as liaison between operational units and the new program, joined them at the observation point. The latest after-action reviews from Afghanistan show 3 separate incidents where the techniques you've developed have directly saved Marine units in compromised positions, he informed Reeves. Your engagement methodology has been adopted across all Special Operations Sniper units. This was perhaps the most meaningful recognition, not the formal decorations or program leadership, but the practical implementation of her approaches saving lives in current operation. As the qualification exercises concluded, one candidate in particular caught Reeves's attention, a female Marine whose performance metrics approached Reeves's own record-setting standard. While observing the candidate's methodical approach to environmental calculation, Reeves recognized elements of her own methodology being naturally incorporated into the next generation of precision specialists. Lieutenant Howard has remarkable aptitude, Harrington acknowledged following Reeves's line of sight. She would have been automatically excluded under our previous selection parameters, despite her obvious capabilities. The operation defines the requirements, Reeves stated simply. When selection focuses on those requirements without extraneous limitations, optimal candidates emerge regardless of conventional expectation. Later that day, as Reeves completed her evaluation reports on the candidate class, she received an unexpected visitor, General Maxwell, the commanding officer who had overseen the Korengal Valley operation from headquarters. Quite a program you built here, Gunnery Sergeant, he observed, studying the performance metrics displayed on her office screens. The operational impact is already being felt across multiple theaters. Thank you, sir, Reeves acknowledged. The candidates have demonstrated exceptional capabilities when traditional limitations are removed from the selection process. The general nodded thoughtfully. I've reviewed the comprehensive analysis of your Korengal operation. The ballistics experts still maintain that several of your confirmed shots exceeded the theoretical performance envelope for human capability. Reeves considered this assessment with characteristic precision. Theoretical models are based on observed performance under controlled conditions. When the operational environment demands performance beyond established parameters, human capability often extends to meet that demand. A diplomatic way of saying you did what was previously considered impossible, Maxwell noted with a slight smile. The reason for my visit goes beyond the program evaluation. The Pentagon has authorized a classified special operations unit focused specifically on precision engagement in denied environments. I want you to establish and lead it. This represented an extraordinary departure from traditional military hierarchy, offering command of a special operations unit to a non-commissioned officer based solely on demonstrated capability, rather than rank or conventional career progression. That would require significant adaptation of established command structures, sir, Reeves observed. So did your performance in Korengal, Maxwell replied. Sometimes the most effective approach requires rewriting established parameters. As Reeves considered this unprecedented opportunity, her thoughts returned briefly to the selection facility where Major Harrington had rejected her scout sniper application, with the assertion that the psychological profile required for operational success isn't compatible with female soldiers. The journey from that rejection to her current position, developing methodologies that were revolutionizing military precision operations, and being offered command of a specialized unit created specifically around her demonstrated capabilities, represented more than personal vindication. It symbolized a fundamental shift in how military institutions evaluated human potential. I would be honored to establish the unit, General, Reeves finally responded, with the understanding that selection will be based exclusively on operational capability metrics rather than traditional parameters. I wouldn't expect anything less, Maxwell acknowledged. Your performance has rewritten our understanding of what's possible. It's only appropriate that the unit you lead continues that evolution. 1 year after the Korengal Valley operation, what had become known as the Reeves methodology had transformed precision engagement approaches throughout special operations community. The techniques she had employed during those critical hours, from environmental calculation to tactical sequencing, were now standard curriculum in advanced training programs. More significantly, the barriers that had nearly prevented her from utilizing those skills had been systematically identified and eliminated, creating opportunities for exceptional candidates regardless of demographic category. The first Scout Sniper class to include female graduates had completed training with performance metrics that matched or exceeded historical standards, direct evidence that capability rather than category determined operational excellence. For Alexandra Reeves herself, the recognition that mattered most came not from the formal decorations or program leadership, but from the operational impact of her methodology. Each report of Marines surviving engagements because of techniques she had developed represented the true measure of her contribution. As she prepared to lead her newly formed Special Operations Unit on its first deployment, Reeves reflected briefly on the journey from rejected applicant to unit command. The institutional barriers that had initially limited her opportunities had ultimately been overcome not through policy arguments or theoretical debates, but through demonstrated performance that redefined what was considered possible. In the high-stakes reality of combat operations, capability was the only metric that ultimately mattered, a truth that her extraordinary performance in Korangal Valley had made impossible to ignore. If this incredible story of an underestimated hero rising to save hundreds of lives through extraordinary skill captured your imagination, hit that subscribe button to join our community. Have you ever witnessed someone proving critics wrong through exceptional performance? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one and would love to hear your stories. Do you think we still underestimate people based on appearance or background rather than actual ability? Let us know. And don't forget to turn on notifications by clicking the bell icon so you never miss our daily uploads of extraordinary true stories that remind us heroes often hide in plain sight.